Hello, everyone. My name is Lynn Jones, and I'm from Truro. I have to say it's a privilege and honor to be part of this video recording of the Black Video Historian. I've wanted to share for quite some time, and this is the first opportunity. So I hope you enjoy as I share just a little bit of my life with you. And if it doesn't work out very well, don't worry. We can do it again. It's not a problem. So as I stated, I was born in Truro, Nova Scotia. I always like to say that I'm a child of Walina and Elmer Jones, and that I come from a long line of African Nova Scotians. And what people don't realize is that African Nova Scotians are the original African people that inhabited not just Nova Scotia, but all of Canada. And because I have different lineage between that comes from my mother and also from my father, then that means that we are the descendants of not only the loyalists, but we got a bit of a refugee as part of our heritage, as do most people in Nova Scotia. And some came later to Nova Scotia that can claim their heritage on the War of 1812. And the most past immigration, not counting present day, would have been the people that came from Barbados and Trinidad and Jamaica to the Cape Breton area to work the mines. So Nova Scotia has had many people that have immigrated to Nova Scotia. My life has been a mixture of so many different experiences that have come from so many different places that I could never tell you my whole life story, but I'll just pick out a few tidbits of things that I'm particularly proud of. I'm sitting in my room in the homestead in Truro, Nova Scotia, as I mentioned, and one of my people that I'm a descendant of is Jeremiah Jones. And I'm sure if you're into technology and Googling, it's quite easy to Google Jeremiah Jones, because Jeremiah Jones, who lived in the property just across the street from where I am presently sitting, was a war hero during the First World War. Lately, people have become to know about the number 2 construction battalion, which was the only segregated unit during the First World War. Well, what people don't realize is not all black people were part of the segregated unit, because how things developed to the war, of course, black people petitioned to fight in the war, weren't allowed, but eventually Ottawa had declared that they could fight as long as there was a commanding officer that would be willing to accept them. And most commanding officers in Canada would not accept black soldiers, which is why we had the number 2 construction battalion. It was a farm unit they called, construction unit who didn't see armed battle. But 16 black men actually did see armed conflict. And my grandfather was one of those 16 men, Jeremiah Jones. Now, actually, he was too old to be going off to war. And he looked so good that he was able to, actually, I don't like to use terminology like lie. He misrepresented himself and said he was something like 20 years old, younger than what he actually was, and he got away with it. So that's how he got to fight in the First World War. What also happened, I have to look at this. What also happened was that I'm sorry that I'm waiting for a call at the same time, but that's not it. What also happened was that his grandchild, who was my cousin, Sidney Morgan Jones, he wanted to fight in the war, but he was too young for the First World War, so he did the opposite of Granddaddy, and he misrepresented himself and said he was a lot older than what he was. So actually, his grandfather and his grandson, Cindy, they were both in the same unit, the 116th Battalion, during the First World War. So I'm only going to use one battle. They fought many battles, wounded, came home, went back, especially Uncle Sid. We called him Uncle because that's what they did in the black community. If somebody was older, he was actually my cousin, but because he was so much older, we called him Uncle Sid. But they got to fight in Vimy Ridge. And Vimy Ridge was quite a famous battle during the First World War because at Vimy Ridge, Canadians hadn't done so well with the Allied forces, and they didn't think Canada really was good fighters. So here we ended up in France on Vimy Ridge, and the Canadians really wanted to prove themselves, but it wasn't quite there. So there was a German machine gun nest that pinned down the Canadian forces on Vimy Ridge. So the commanding officer of my grandfather, Jeremiah Jones, sent him all alone, into the German machine gun nest, see what was happening. Now, why would they send this lone black man into all this nest if it wasn't just to die? So anyway, he went into the German machine gun nest, and guess what happened? He captured the whole nest all by himself, shot those that he could, and the rest laid down their arms, and he marched them back to his commanding officer. And the joke is that when he threw down the guns, he said, "Are these any good to you?" Is what he said to the commanding officer. So you may wonder, how could one lone black man capture a whole nest? Well, you need to know your history to understand this. Because before the First World War was the Franco-Boer War. And where we live, there's a train track just behind where we live. And lo and behold, in the black community there, the train used to stop on a regular basis to change tracks before it went into town. So it was right practically sitting in our community where the train stopped. And usually, people that had hitch rides in the boxcars, we all know about them, including the Romanians, which we at the time would have called gypsies, but that's not what you call them anymore, they're Romanians. And also people who were hiding for whatever reason. So a German officer jumped the train and came into the black community. And he happened to stay, which the black community took everybody in, and he happened to stay at my grandparents' house, where my grandfather was a young boy. This German officer taught my grandfather German. Not only did he teach him German and he learned it well, but he also taught him German war tactics. So what would have happened on Vimy Ridge many years later was that my grandfather would be able to understand what the Germans were saying in terms of what kind of tactics they were going to be using, because he knew German. And also he knew what war tactics because of this German person. So the commanding officer at the time recommended my grandfather for the highest honor during the war, but because he was black, he did not receive it. And it wasn't until he was long gone in 2010 that he actually was presented with the medal to say what bravery he had done during the First World War. So that was my grandfather. I would never tell a story about the men in the family if I didn't tell about the women in the family, because we often leave the women off the historical map when we're talking. So there's several women in the family that made their mark in history. And I tell you all this because one thing that really bothers me is when people say they got somewhere all on their own. Oh, I got this, I did it all on my own. And without recognizing from whence they came and the people that paved the path. And these are some of the people that paved the path for many things that I did later in my life. And one of them was my grandfather's sister, who Martha Jones, who was the first black person to graduate from the Teachers College, which was the only Teachers College at the time. Her name was Martha Jones, and the Teachers College was in Truro. And what's interesting is that at that time, people traveled from all over the Maritimes to get their teacher training in Truro. And Martha Jones was the very first black person to ever attend the Teachers College. Actually, we are in the process of honoring her in the town of Truro, where the site is being cleared for a park to honor her and some other educators. I'll jump very quickly to say, in terms of those education aspects, later on, my mom, who graduated from college at 60 years of age, she grew up with a grade 5 education, and she had 10 kids before she graduated and went back to school and graduated from college at 60 years of age, and she became the first black teacher in the town of Truro. So you can see that there's this legacy of people that that came before me and who I honor and respect, and that guide my path as I go. Each one of those people was extremely active in church, and there's nothing that they did that they didn't give all praises to God, including my grandfather, as they did whatever it was that they did. They talk about slavery. I'll jump quickly. Slavery, and saying that people didn't know that there was slavery in Nova Scotia, and it's the world's best kept secret about slavery in Nova Scotia. Well, we have the records of my grandfather, Jeremiah Jones, his wife, who presented a major paper on slavery in Nova Scotia. So that's one of the records that show that we were well aware of slavery in Nova Scotia, and how, as products of that system, how we suffered in many ways, including intergenerational trauma, which still today people are dealing with, the intergenerational trauma of having been enslaved and not even realizing that we had been enslaved. I'll jump from there in some of that family history to say that for whatever reason, the family from which I come is a family of activism, and in that activism, my mom would often talk about not being free until everybody's free. So we were never, ever, ever permitted to just look for our own way out of any circumstances. And it's interesting because even today, which is what year is this? 2024. I keep forgetting it's 2024. 2024. I have a lot of health challenges that I never had. And I, in making my way through those health challenges, I didn't really want to have to deal with the system. I just wanted to get well. And then I had a wake-up call. And that's why I renamed myself. Instead of Lynn, you can call me Stella now, because Stella got her groove back. Because it was at that point that I realized, Lynn, for whatever reason, God has given you this gift of activism. And you can't sit back and not use it. And when Stella got her groove back, I warned people in that health system. I actually phoned and warned them and said, Stella is coming in, and I am not putting up with all the atrocities of this healthcare system in Canada. It's not right. You're not treating me right. And I thought, if I had trouble at first not fighting this system, imagine all the elderly people that have to deal with that system, and can't have no voice. They have no voice. So in Stella making that decision, she warned the healthcare system, but also she ended up doing a media blitz and what have you. But what I decided was I couldn't keep up the activism. My intentions wasn't to do the activism, but rather to just tell people what the system is really, what's really happening with the system. And we were able to make a lot of headway with other people picking up the mantle to do something about healthcare, which is atrocious. What we're dealing with nowadays, and that has to be addressed. So I'm glad at least I had the opportunity to raise my voice and contact people that could help to do that. So that's even today, and that's part of that activism. So like I said, I come from, there's a legacy of the activism. I'm jumping all over the place, and that's okay, I guess, because I was told just talk. So another thing that often happened, I think our household was a bit different from most households. It's a very busy household, a household with many activities happening at the same time, all the time. But one of the things was, if you came to our house, people really pride themselves on how their house is upkept and all that kind of thing. So it was like that with our house, but there was a difference. And the difference was, I talk about the dining room table. And I loved our dining room table. I don't know if you know, they call them leaves. The dining room table could be small, or you pull it out and it would have all these leaves that you'd put in to make it that much bigger. So all week long, our dining room table took up the whole room practically. Not only did it take up the whole room, but it was filled with papers and magazines and what have you, the whole dining room table. And some people would find that quite embarrassing, because who wants to walk to your house and have all these papers and things? Well, I actually loved that dining room table as a kid, and when I recognized the value of that table, because on that table was this whole wealth of knowledge. My mom would keep articles about the black community, obituaries, news items, whatever. The table would pack all week long with interesting articles. And even as a small child, I would sit at the table for hours and just read some of the things that she had as part of the table. I love that table. And she encouraged us to read articles. So she never had, I was saying to someone the other day, it's interesting. There were 10 kids in our family, and every single one of them are proficient readers. Every single one of them, no exception. Because reading was very much a part of the lifestyle of the family. And if you found something that was interesting, we'd read it to each other out loud then. When at first you couldn't read, and then eventually you would read it out loud so everybody else could know what was there. So anyway, I love that table, love the articles. But more importantly, when I was about 8 years old, I was singing in the music festival, and I placed, I don't know, maybe second. And my picture was in the newspaper, first time ever. Now you got to imagine the time. This was in the 50s. And in those times, there was very few black people ever in the paper. And the people that was often articles, church articles, teas, not like, people say, oh, it was crime and all this. No, it was not. That's not what was in black people were in the paper for. They were often church events, the church social, church tea, picnics, things like that was what was in the paper. So or weddings, this particular day with my picture, I was so excited that as papers piled up on the paper, my picture would get underneath because there's new ones coming on top. I said, oh no, this one too. So I would take my picture and pull it out very slyly and put it on top so everybody could see that I had been in the paper. And after a while, I had interests that maybe my mom didn't have, so she encouraged me to start my own collection of newspaper articles or magazine articles or write things, and that's what I did. So from 8 years old, I had started a scrapbook and articles and what have you. But I continued that habit for over 50 years. Over 50 years, I gathered up these articles and what have you. And even during my school days, when I left home for university, I had to carry these boxes. At first, there was no such thing as a tote. Like we have totes nowadays, the plastic totes. No, in those days you had boxes. The boxes would get ruined, and I'd get a new box and put the same papers in a new box. And I had to carry these boxes everywhere I went and everywhere I moved. But over time, with these boxes, I kept saying, "Oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it later. I'll make a scrapbook later." But it never came. I never had time. But I still carried the boxes. I still collected. I collected papers all for years, over 50 years. When I went to retire, before retirement, I said, "I'll do it in my retirement." My retirement came, and I still didn't do it. So I thought, I got to do something with these papers because this is the end of the line. So a friend of mine said, Lynn, by then it was in trunks and totes and everything else. And a friend of mine said, Lynn, you know what? My kids have all moved out of the house. You can bring all those totes and boxes to my house, and I'll give you 1 year to do something. We'll open them up and see what's there, and I'll give you 1 year to decide what you're going to do with these papers. So I said, well, this is a great offer. So we do that. And the first time we opened the boxes, she opened them first, and I came and looked. I literally went to my knees. There were thousands of articles that I had forgotten about over 50 years. Imagine a 50-year span. And it was just amazing, the history and geography and what have you in these articles. So I contacted various institutions and professors and whatever and said, is there something that can be done? I don't want these papers thrown in the garbage. It's history, it's whatever. And to make a long story short, I ended up with an offer from St. Mary's University. They wanted to secure the papers. By then, I also had another offer, but I actually took the St. Mary's offer because I thought they would do more because they didn't have a lot of black things. Well, today, when they estimated the number of articles, there's over 20,000 articles in the collection, and the collection is in their archival collection, and it's called the Lynn Jones African, Canadian, and Diaspora Heritage Collection. And it is the most used collection in all of the archives. And people come from across the country to view the articles, get information that they cannot get anywhere else from these articles. We are attempting to digitize. Digitizing is very expensive. And so we have some of the articles are digitized so you can actually view the articles from different places, but we regularly get requests now, it's actually moved about the world, to digitize because people want to access the articles. So that's another one of my projects. I'm going to jump again. And I told you I can sit here and talk forever on these different projects that I have going. And she said, end it. Okay. They said, end it for now. And we'll go do another chapter at another time. Thank you for listening.